Hello and good night. Welcome to another edition of In Touch right here on Choice TV. It's Monday and so I know you're looking forward to another informative and interesting discussion. I know that for many of us, we are now getting over our Journée Creole weekend. For many, it was a Creole week of activities. I hope that it was fun and enjoyable, and that for you it was incident-free. Tonight we have an interesting discussion with a very special guest, no stranger to TV, no stranger to public commentary. He serves as St. Lucia's pathologist. He is also an independent senator. Many persons call him the Maverick because he has so many ideas and he speaks so boldly on so many issues. And so tonight I welcome Honorable Stephen King to In Touch. Thank you for joining me tonight.
Okay, good to be here, Julia.
And I am so excited that you've decided to become a guest on that show. There are so many issues that we will discuss. In fact, as I indicated, you serve in so many different areas. In fact, I was just asking you, how do you keep up? How do you go about organizing your schedule in such a way that you get all of what you need to get done? And you, earlier today, when I spoke with you, indicated that you were busy dealing with autopsies, and I know many St. Lucians know you as a post-mortem doctor.
Yeah.
What was your day like?
Today was a rough day, actually. So, sad thing today was, you know, because well, 2 teenagers for post-mortem today. You know, when we find our children dying, various means, especially those that are preventable and should not happen. That's a rough day. So today, when you called me, it was just after that.
So as a doctor, you do go through the emotional, you know, cycles when you deal with cases like that, and you spoke about the children in particular. I know that you have a very soft spot and you speak on youth issues. You have been an advocate looking for opportunities in education, employment, and also a way out for many of our young people who are struggling. And so I imagine that it would be very difficult for you as a father and as an advocate to perform autopsies on children and our youth.
Especially because I find that we are not raising our children in the environment which we should be. We haven't created an environment which is as healthy and as nurturing and as kind as it should be to our children. To me, we are raising, and it's shown in the adolescent health reports of St. Lucia and in the Caribbean for that matter, levels of depression among our children, suicidal ideation. 18% of our youth have suicidal ideation. We're seeing suicides in our youth. That, to me, is such a telling tale. Violence among our youth, rage, anger, frustration, hopelessness. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of good in our youth, but I find the environment that we, who are the guardians, we are the engineers of the environment, we older people, we have not engineered this environment which allows our youth to develop in a healthy manner. And that's a passion of mine, to try and advocate for a healthier environment, an environment that has less violence, an environment of a school curriculum that gives children the kind of life skills that they need to be the kinds of citizens that we want and they want to be, to have the success that they need in their life. Be it the vocational skills, the academic skills, the life skills. You know, these are the things that we advocate for. You hear me talking out against corporal punishment. Up to doing a speech for Monroe, I told Dr. Robert Lewis, we've got to make the environment in our schools kind to our children. Corporal punishment could never be kind to our children. How can we have an environment of corporal punishment and then say we're being kind to our children? We're doing it in their interest. This is not discipline. That's physical force.
We have spoken about what needs to be done and what currently exists. There are many persons who believe that we are in a state of hopelessness as it relates to our young people, where they are and where they are going. There are many parents who would say to you, I have done everything that I possibly can do with all of the support that I had, and my child has still gone the wrong way. There are communities that would say to you, from 5 years old, I knew that this child was going nowhere, and I knew this was a bad egg, for want of a better phrase. How do we get the formula right? What do you think is the answer to ensure that we have a more peaceful community and that we have our young people growing up in a better environment, being free to express themselves in terms of their disappointments, or when they're going through depression. Because it seems as if we are in a society that is constantly beating down on each other.
That's right.
In different forms, in different spheres, different walks of life, in school and so on. We always point out what is wrong with someone, and we're not very ready to praise people when they do things that are different. How do we change that culture and that environment so that we have a better working relationship, we have a better environment to raise our children in?
I think that's a million-dollar question. I think it starts first and foremost with how a seed is planted and grows, which means how a woman becomes pregnant. So, in other words, I think that a woman should become pregnant because she chooses to be pregnant. She chooses to have a child. And that pregnant woman should be supported. She should be in an environment where she feels comfortable, loved, and happy and content. So she has a content pregnancy. And then the first few years of life, the first 2, 3, 4, 5 years of life, of that early childhood should be maximum stimulation of that child, not being exposed to violence, domestic violence, community violence, drugs and vulgarity and sexual explicit, not only movies and not only things, but actually in the household, in the community. So that is where we start. And then from there we go to our schools, and in our schools we have a curriculum which actually recognizes that each child learns differently, each child has different demands, each child is coming from a different background, and can create that learning space for that child, so that child can fully actualize, so that child never feels that that child is stupid, that that child cannot achieve. You know, because we keep on telling our children they have a one-size-fits-all kind of education system. If you don't do well here, then you're stupid. That could never be so. No child is stupid. And that is the message we have to send. Every child can achieve, and that is the purpose of our education system. Now, all of that has to happen, and not only in the schools, but in the communities, because I'm a father. I have had 5 children in my life, right? But the truth is, all of St. Lucia's children are also my children, because when I'm in the community, when I speak to a child or a young person, I must speak to that person as if that is my child. And so must you. You must speak to my child as if my child is your child, because it takes all of us to create that environment that is healthy for our children to develop in a healthy manner. And it's not just for them, it's for all of us, because we want that society. That's how I see it.
Yes. Because in order for us to have a safe community, your child must be a good child. My child must be a good child. And this is not simply doing all that is necessary to raise your child in the right way, but we all must come together, because the environment that my child is going out into may very well change or reverse all of what I have done, at home.
Precisely.
But I'm very interested in hearing, what are your views on universal secondary school education?
I think universal secondary school education is good. I even think universal tertiary education is good. But my point is, on universal secondary education, it must not be the one-size-fits-all. So we must have the vocational training in there. I'm a big fan of the CARE schools. Why I'm a big fan of the CARE school is because the Center for Adolescent Renewal and Education is a program that gives life skills and creates that nurturing environment which allows a child to actualize in the skills that they feel competent, comfortable, and they want to get, plus with the life skills. So in other words, you don't just have to do the math, English, physics, chemistry, and get your 80s in that. You can actually do, yes, you can do your math, you can do your English, you can do your carpentry, you can do your electrical, you can do your general maintenance, and you can take a chemistry too if that's your inclination. But the point is, we need to have that kind of education system. In particular, I think their big asset is the adolescent development program, where they do the spices, where they make sure that they look at the holistic development of a human being in their adolescent phase. So you talk about the spirituality, the physical, the intellectual, the whole emotional of development of that child. And their curriculum is, and ADP is not a subject, ADP is the manner in which they deliver the whole curriculum. that model, I think, is a much better model than the one we tend to adopt. So I agree with universal secondary education, but I think it is the content and the curriculum that needs to be delivered, and that needs to be changed.
I think there are many persons who share that point of view, and I've seen some of the work of the KES school in particular, and I think they're doing an excellent job.
Yeah.
We have also seen institutions such as the NSDC coming on board to have more vocational and life skills oriented training for our young people, because as you said, sometimes when we go through the formal education system, we focus so much on the academics that we do not take time to brush up and to strengthen other areas of that would be needed, by the way, when we go out into the world of work, when we are encountering other persons, and understand that you must be able, for example, to work with people you do not like. You must be able to exchange views. You must be able to make your points even though you disagree without disrespecting and so on. And these are some of the things that are critical to ensuring that we have harmony. That's right. in our community.
Because we must train, or we must raise our children to be thinking children, critical thinkers, creative thinkers. It's really their attitude to knowledge, their attitude to life, their attitude to themselves, to the higher power, and the attitude to one another, attitude to their country. That is what we need. And that, I don't think we're doing a good job at nurturing in our existing education system.
Agreed. Dr. King, you were one of the first medical doctors to speak out publicly on St. Lucian's preparation for Ebola. In fact, you sounded the alarm, and you said that you do not think that we are doing some of the things that we need to do as a matter of urgency. Since that time and now, a lot has changed. There was a parliamentary briefing where the Ministry of Health as well as OACS representatives spoke to Parliament and spoke to the nation as well as to what is happening where we are. Are you satisfied with the progress so far, and what are some of the critical issues that you have that you desire to see addressed immediately if we are to put ourselves in a better position to respond?
You're right. I think that I was very concerned, because understanding the science of the Ebola virus and the disease that it causes, I don't think we're ready yet. We're still not ready. But we have actually started a process which will have us ready in some time to come. When I say ready, I don't say nobody's ever, as I said, we're never ready for Ebola, but we're as prepared as we can be. Now, we hope never to get a case of Ebola, but the chances are we must be prepared to deal with it. If we're going to get Ebola, it's going to be a case that we're importing. We're going to get an imported case of Ebola. What I think, and let's go back to the science. The science of Ebola is clear, and you need to follow the science. What happens with Ebola? And it's a very interesting virus. Okay, it's a virus that came from...
Interesting and scary.
It's scary. It came from animals into humans.
Yes.
It seems to be endemic in the fruit bat, the African fruit bat. But it does get into primates, and it does get into the human population as it did. When it crosses over to us, what it seems to do is it starts to proliferate, and it actually, after 2 to 21 days, we then begin to get sick. It's an interesting virus, because it's only when we begin to get sick that we actually become infectious. And that's an important scientific point to make. People who are asymptomatic do not appear to be infectious, as far as the science tells us at this point in time. Okay, and that is borne out. If you follow the stories in the press that are coming to us, it's borne out by the epidemic to date. Then, what it does, when you become infectious, you actually, when that virus begins to proliferate and it's in the body fluids, you become more and more infectious until you die. Or, of course, which happens in about, right now, if you read The Economist, it says that the case fatality rate is 70%. If you follow the stats coming off the press, it looks like about 50%. 11,000 cases or so, and 5,000 plus dead. So it seems to be about 50% or so, between 50 and 70%. What happens if so the people who are really at risk of this virus are the family carers who are caring for a sick person, the healthcare workers who are caring for a sick person, the people who have to transport and bury the dead, because a dead body is probably as infectious, if not the most infectious element of the whole Ebola disease process. So that, I think that's very important for us to understand. Having said that, what are some of the gaps? If you're going to deal with Ebola, and it is clear if you look at the countries that have been able to handle it, Senegal, Nigeria,
yeah.
right? And even the previous 24 epidemics or outbreaks of Ebola that have occurred in Africa since 1976 when it was first identified. Early case identification is key. You must pick up the case early.
Yes.
You must isolate the person early, and you must isolate them in a manner in which the healthcare workers are safe and other patients are safe. And I'll come back to that, why there's a gap on what we have to do there. Then you must also do contact tracing, which means you must have a public health system that can track down everybody who's been in contact with the sick person, all right? And in fact, everybody who's been in contact with the asymptomatic person as well, just to be 100% sure,
yes.
all right? Even though we believe that the asymptomatic person does not spread, but we want to know so that we can follow. And you must have a good surveillance system, which means if you follow the New York guidelines, twice a day on a high-risk contact means or even a medium-risk contact should have temperatures twice a day. So you must have that kind of system. In addition, when you have your treatment facility, and that is why we are advocating for a designated treatment facility, a separate treatment facility, it is not wise in our situation in St. Lucia in particular to handle and treat Ebola in our existing hospitals, be it St. Jude, be it Victoria, or be it Tapion. It is better to have a designated treatment facility, and a number of reasons for that. One, you can isolate people properly away from other patients, and that has a number of implications, as you could well appreciate, in terms of people accessing that hospital, yes, and crossing, material crossing, waste material crossing, body fluids crossing from one place to another in the same hospital compound. So it's better to be separate. In addition, you can have trained teams of healthcare workers so that they are specialized in what they do. They have the whole areas for putting on the personal protective equipment. They have the hot zones where they can go into with buddies, with supervisors who can monitor, see what they're doing, make sure they don't breach protocol, make sure when they come out of the hot zone and they decontaminating, move into the decontamination zone, they can be decontaminated properly without putting themselves or exposing themselves. And they do that in a monitored, helped fashion, buddy fashion. That's how it's done. And then, of course, they move out and the other team moves in. That kind of focus is what you need, because you don't really want somebody treating somebody with Ebola and then going across onto the next ward and treating somebody with his heart attack, or the lady who's pregnant on the other side. You want to have the specialized centers. So that's one of the gaps in our present system, because we have not, although we have identified the new National Hospital as a site in which we will put up a prefabricated isolation center. But in the meantime, if we got a case today
we would have to respond.
We'd have to respond today. And so what I want to see is the response for today. Now, we have heard some responses such as, oh, well, we have a space in mental wellness where we could quarantine somebody. We have a space at VH with the chest wing that we are modifying. We might have a space at St. Jude with a particular room. I don't think that is the right response right now. I think we need to have the designated spot. Right now, I think we should designate the new National Hospital, make it available as of tonight or tomorrow morning, as the case may be, and be able to handle it in that manner, so that we could give very clear protocols to our doctors and nurses and immigration officers and so on as to how things should be handled. But let me back up a little bit more and show some of the other things that could happen with Ebola.
Sure. And
why our security forces need to be involved. Because things can happen such as somebody is dead in a house, right? Yes. And somebody could have come in and who knows? So our security forces need to be able to respond, to move into households where people have died, to be able to remove them safely if they died of Ebola in that house. We need to be able to decontaminate the house. So we need to have hazard teams that can actually do proper professional decontamination, right? And it's not difficult, but it just means that people need to be trained to be able to respond in that manner. In addition, when somebody dies and they need to be moved and buried, we need to also have specialized teams that can do that, be they security forces or be they funeral home teams that we have trained. I've said all that to make the point that training specialized
It's
training,
critical.
and teamwork is critical. So designated facility, proper training of the teams that need to respond, and then of course the general education training for the general population to point out to the general population, don't panic. The general population is not at great risk from Ebola. It is people who are caring for sick people, be they family, or be they healthcare workers, or be they security forces, be they borders, and we'll come back to borders in a little while, or people who are burying. These are the people who are at the greatest risk. At the borders, if somebody's coming in asymptomatic, that's not a problem. The problem is if somebody comes in sick from the borders, so your port, because you could have somebody on a yacht, on a
Yes.
ship, right? That, in fact, you're more likely to get a sick person coming in through the seaport
As opposed
to the airport. So we must make sure that our seaports can respond, or our teams can respond to a vessel that has somebody who's sick on the vessel, in a proper manner. If that, or for that matter, maybe the strategy should be how we quarantine and handle somebody who's sick on a vessel.
Yes.
But that's
Well, in fact, last week we had on the program last week the Chief of Port Police from SLASPA, as well as the Controller of Customs. On the SLASPA's end, they did indicate that there is a quarantine room and that there are port health officers who are on there. We seem to have the initial response. There is order, there is coordination, but what next? Which
That's
is
right.
where we speak about
Where
the
you take a sick
treatment
person.
and what next. There
That's
is
right.
a limited amount of time someone can spend in a quarantine room on the port.
You can't.
You need to be able to take them somewhere for treatment.
The key here is minimize exposure of people to body fluids. So the sooner you can take a person who's excreting body fluids that have virus in them, vomiting, diarrhea, or whatever, and move them into a designated treatment facility where specialized teams can handle the situation safely, the person safely. That is what you need to do. And that is why the designated facility is, to me, the key, because then we can all hub into that designated facility from wherever.
Do you think there is a gap in our human resource? And I speak of our doctors and specialized nurses. I noticed the response in the US, for example. You have nurses who are trained in special areas, such as highly communicable diseases, or those who are perhaps trained in dealing with body fluids and tissues. So it is not the general training that you would require to become a general practitioner or to become a nurse, but they have been selected based on competencies in certain specialized areas. Do you believe that there's a gap in our system with our healthcare workers?
I think our healthcare workers are well trained, and I think all we need now, because in fact I'll back it up and say that we've all been trained in universal body substance precautions. And in fact, one of the advantages or one of the lessons that Ebola is telling us now is we all need to improve our universal precautions, even regardless of Ebola.
Yes.
All right? So all healthcare workers have been trained. The truth is we need to be reminded, and Ebola reminds us, but also when we're dealing with Ebola specifically, suspect or confirmed cases of Ebola, we need to make sure that we have trained our people in how to handle that properly. Now that we have not been trained in, and that we need to do. So, but that is not difficult. That we can do in a matter of days. Once we have the appropriate protective equipment, which we don't yet have. We will have that shortly. It's not yet, which is another reason why we're not 100% ready, because we don't have the full protective gear as per the new CDC guidelines at this point in time. They will be on island shortly, we understand. But all of that we need so that we can be trained in how to use the gear, put it on, take it off, how to decontaminate, how to treat, how to manage. Because the level of body substance precautions that one has to take with treating an Ebola patient is high. Because it's the body fluids of a sick person are highly infectious, right? So that is why it is so important. So I think the answer is, whereas we don't have people trained in Ebola treatment, but we can, because the basics, our basic foundation is there. All you have to do is do the specialized training on top with the designated teams. Not with everybody, but with those who are going to be treating people.
Understood. Sometime last week, there was a public announcement from the Tapia Hospital where they indicated that they would not be treating Ebola patients. In fact, the nurse who spoke on behalf of the hospital indicated that while they are trained to screen, and to determine whether or not it is a case or whether that person is at risk, what they will do is to refer this individual to the national response team, who will then take over from there. There has been outrage from certain sections of the population, and many persons are of the view that the Tapia Hospital is neglecting its responsibility to the people of St. Lucia, that as a doctor, as a nurse, as a hospital, your first response is to care and to protect, and that they are of the view that in this case, Tapia Hospital is basically passing on the buck to the national facilities. What are your views on that? And do you believe that we are getting the right message on that issue, or are you of the view that it is best if we have one central agency responsible for the response?
Oh, for sure. I think what has to happen is there needs to be a central national response. A central agency. You should have a central committee. Nigeria actually set up an EOC, an emergency response committee that they set up to do it. So yes, you need a central committee, and it has to be a national response. Tapion's pronouncement in the press, I think, was probably premature and probably not the best in terms of public relations, but it was not wrong. It is what we need to do, which is we cannot be pretending to think that we can handle Ebola at Tapion Hospital or VH or St. Jude. What you really need is, I think, as I was talking about earlier, is that national response, that nationally designated treatment facility that we can all refer to, because that is the safest way to do it, not only for the healthcare workers, but for the other patients.
But we are at a point, Dr. King, where we spoke of the gaps and the limitations a little while ago, and you raised some serious concerns. For example, we say that we are moving to that wing at Victoria Hospital, and you indicated that there are some difficulties with that, that you need to have a specialized team that is dedicated solely to this and so on. Right now, if we are in a situation where someone has presented himself or herself to be treated and say to the hospital, well, I have that travel history, or I did so and so, where exactly is this person going, noting that you have recognized the limitations? And
that is why we need to designate now, and we need to fix now, and not wait. Because even the chest wing, which is being renovated right now, to try to do this, to try and make it possible, but it is still not going to be adequate. So I think it's going to be difficult to try to treat somebody at the chest wing. This is what those of us at VH are feeling at this point in time, because you have to handle not only the treatment but the waste and the healthcare worker who flows through and the surrounding. So the chest wing is not ideal. Now, it's true you could use it as a temporary hold, but that is not a safe hold.
But knowing what we know, that it is not the ideal and it is not the best, and you may not be able to treat someone with Ebola at that wing, do you think it is right, or it is conscionable for that person to be turned away or to be passed over from the Tapia Hospital? Well, does Tapia have the capacity to deal with it?
No, Tapia does not have the capacity. Neither does VH. That's the point. That's why the government must, in my view, must designate. Now, we are lucky. We have the new national hospital built already, sitting down there.
Yes.
It is available. Now
is it? I do not know that it has been officially handed over.
Well, let's put it this way. That's why I say, this is a public health emergency.
Okay.
This is an emergency.
So the response would be different.
The response has to be different. We cannot do business as usual in this preparation. Now, and they may be doing a technical audit of the national hospital. So what?
It's in the commissioning phase, yeah.
So what? The point is, if we need to do something in the interest of people, our people, then we do it. I mean, I don't think anybody in the world can dare look at us and say, oh, you can't touch this because we are doing this administrative procedure here and people must die or people must be at greater risk because of that. No, I don't agree with that. So I think that we can be bold enough. Now, we may never have to do it. That's the point. But the point is, you have to be ready. And we could be ready. We are privileged in St. Lucia to have that new national hospital sitting down there, ready to go, connected to its waste treatment. So in other words, it is by far the safest facility to use at this point in time to handle somebody with Ebola. And I think we should go there.
You served as Chief Medical Officer
Yeah.
in St. Lucia previously. What would you have done differently in responding to this situation?
Ha, that's a long question to answer. A number of things that need to happen. First of all, you need to designate the facility. I think the first move would be to designate the new National Hospital, the medical wing with the 6 isolation rooms that are in there right now. Go through it, walk through it, make sure I can divide it into the zones so that I can make sure I have the proper decontamination, you know, the whole
Works.
the whole works,
Yeah.
which we can do because we have the space. That's the first thing I'd have done. And the second thing I think is to make sure that the legislative amendments are done so that Ebola is put onto the public health regulations, because it's not on there right now, so that we can then bring to bear the force of the public health law when we have a case of Ebola, so we can do the quarantining, the isolation, the contact tracing in a proper manner with legislative backup, which we need. The next thing I would have done is I would have done my best to see how I could secure my borders with the advanced passenger information system and see how immigration can actually link with health to know who is coming from where long before they land. In addition to that, look at the seaports and see how I can make sure that the passenger manifests are documented and clear enough that I can know where you are coming from when you're coming in. And then work with my border control, immigration and customs, to make sure that we have the system in place. The other thing I think to be done is make sure you have the protective gear as quickly, and not the first set of gear that PAHO gave. I listen to PAHO and WHO, and I want to come back to that because I know we have to go for a break, but I want to come back to that.
Sure.
I listen to PAHO and WHO because they make recommendations, and I think they do great jobs at that. But at the end of the day, we make decisions here. So in other words, if the protective gear is not what I think is up to speed, then I will make a decision to get more protective gear than they gave me to say me that's good enough for me. Okay? Do my homework.
That can only come from your experience as a medical doctor and your own interaction with other persons who are in.
Right, but you see, Médecins Sans Frontières were handling Ebola since March in Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone. And then they were showing us what needed to be in place. And I quicker go to them than at that point in time, since they had the experience. So we could have known, because when you look at what they do, it gives you a great idea of what we should be doing. And many of the guidelines now you are beginning to catch up with what they were doing. And even they were having problems with what they were doing.
And we are seeing constant changes
Yes.
changes from CDC and WHO. Do you agree with the Prime Minister's decision to implement travel restrictions
Yes, I did.
from the West African countries?
I did. And people say it's a controversial thing, but I agree with him. Why? Because St. Lucia was not prepared to handle Ebola. We had to do the very best to protect the borders. Also, I think the Prime Minister showed leadership. It takes a fair amount of guts to do something like that, because it flies in the face of what WHO recommends and so on. In addition, part of the problem is we're a little country. Now, like if the United States puts a travel ban, it's slightly different. What the United States has done is they put travel advisories, if you notice.
Yes.
They have travel advisories. So they have grades of travel advisory. We put a travel ban. Why? Because we don't really have people going from here. We are not responding to the epidemic in Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone at this point in time. Right? Much as we should do whatever we can. We can advocate, we can maybe send 1 or 2 health workers, we can probably send some money to the fund. But we really cannot, we don't have the capacity to respond to the source of the infection. What we have to do is put in place to protect our people, if in case a case was to come here. Because what we have to do is make sure that St. Lucia does not become a situation where Ebola starts to take a hold, right? Yes. So that's our first and primary task. So I think I agree with the Prime Minister. Put the travel ban until such time as we can do it. It showed leadership. It galvanized action because it made all of us get up and say, wait, this is serious. We have to do something. So for all of those reasons, I think it was the right thing to do, despite the criticism that people may give it.
You are watching In Touch right here on Choice TV. Of course, we are streaming live on www.choice39.tv. Tell a friend the show is on. We're due for our first commercial break. When we come back, we'll be continuing our discussion with our independent senator, pathologist, Honorable Dr. Stephen King. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. Welcome back to In Touch. I'm your host, Jadia Japie-Emmanuel, and we are speaking with pathologist Honorable Dr. Stephen King. A very interesting discussion so far, and we have been speaking about, well, we started off by speaking on the human aspect of your job, because, you know, sometimes people believe you just go in there and you do what you have to do, you take off that suit and you walk out. But we have been focusing on Ebola too and St. Lucia's response. There are some who have indicated, and I speak about officials as well, that our response has been limited because of the world's response, that we have to rely on guidelines from the WHO and the CDC, that St. Lucia on its own could not have gone ahead to make certain preparations and to take certain action unless there was direct instruction and support from the WHO. What is your view on that? I know that you referred to a group a while ago that was responding to the situation in Africa. Do you think we're too dependent on the WHO?
I think so. I think WHO obviously is a powerful organization and does great good. I don't have a problem with that. And I'll come back to where they dropped the ball on this one. But at the end of the day, we are a sovereign country. We must think. Same thing we were talking about earlier about our children, teaching our children to think.
Yes.
We must think. What do we have? What are our risks? What must we do to protect ourselves to be as safe as we can be? Now, so you need to scan the environment all the time. Médecins Sans Frontières since March has been telling the world what has been happening in West Africa. The world has not been listening, including us. We have not been listening, right? And I am so disappointed in the WHO system and the international community, including us in this one, that since March the epidemic started, 3 months it took before people could even identify, oh, it really is Ebola. Médecins Sans Frontières was calling. 2 months later, before they declared global health emergency, 1,000 people had died by that time before the WHO declared it was a public health emergency. And it took another 2 months again before the response started. And the response really started when cases began to come out of Africa, into Europe and into the United States. Because, and I want to ask, did we care? So when we talk about our Prime Minister, for instance, being discriminatory because there's a travel ban, I don't think that's the story of discrimination in this one. The real story of discrimination is a world that sat by and watched Africans die. That is the real story. Now, we may argue this way and that way about it, but we should have responded. We should have responded back in April of 2014 when Médecins Sans Frontières was saying, please, we have a problem here. Wake up. So that's why I say, St. Lucia, yes, we dropped the ball because maybe we were looking at WHO. Maybe we look at PAHO and WHO. But maybe we should also look beyond PAHO and WHO and look around and see what else is happening. Because, you know, there's more information in the world. And anyway, and maybe we should be advocating. Maybe our role would have been see what Médecins Sans Frontières was saying and be advocating with WHO and say, look, guys, these guys are right. There's a problem here.
Yes.
You've got to do something.
Understood. Dr. King, speaking more to the local context and St. Lucia, our healthcare system, what many persons are concerned about the quality of care and the cost of care. St. Lucia started a process many years ago and we were aiming to achieve universal health care. Strides had been made. Now, for example, we have diabetics and those who are hypertensive receiving medication and receiving care at our public institutions. But we fell short of achieving that ultimate goal, and that is to ensure that every single St. Lucian has access to health care at a cost that is minimal. Mm-hmm. We did not achieve that goal. In fact, under the last administration, I do not believe that any progress was made whatsoever in dealing with universal health care. What are your own views as to why we are still where we are today? And despite not having achieved it in the last 5 years and the time lost and the resources lost, do you think it is something that we could have achieved by now?
That's a good question. Universal health care. And everybody talks about it now. Everybody says this is the way you must go. We were well ahead of the game in terms of universal health care, in terms of thinking it through. Okay. I think we could have done a lot more. I really do. I think in 2006, I think it was when we launched the diabetic program. somewhere around May 2006. And that was supposed to be the first in a series of programs that we were going to roll out. In addition to that, we were going to implement the health information system throughout the country, which is because that's crucial if you're going to have a coordinated, organized, controlled healthcare system. We were also going to move to having service agreements with our hospitals with proper funding for service at the St. Jude and at the Victoria hospitals. That was where we were going. And I think all of those things could have been done. It would have demanded that our Victoria Hospital became statutorized. That should have happened already. St. Jude was already statutorized. And at the time, what we were saying was that let us start with St. Jude Hospital, since St. Jude was already ready to go. And remember, that was before St. Jude burnt.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay? So we were in a situation where we could have actually entered into agreements with St. Jude Hospital and started the agreements. We would have been able to better fund, in my view anyway, we better fund St. Jude Hospital and maybe even averted some of the problems that we are now dealing with at the St. Jude Hospital. We were moving into a system where we were going to capitate, which means we were going to give a catchment of people to our hospital and say, this is your group, we pay you X amount per year, divided quarterly payments as your budget, and you must provide all services for these people as per our agreement. What that was going to make happen was that the St. Jude Hospital would have to move, or whichever hospital, would have to have agreements with or support the health centers and the polyclinics in their area. So we were moving towards an integrated health system where we were supporting primary care by actually defining and controlling hospital care, funding it properly, but defining exactly what we're doing. So a St. Lucian could know, or a resident could know exactly what they would get at the hospital. They could know exactly what pharmaceuticals they could get. They could, and of course, at either minimal copay, so a small copay, yes, or at no copay. And that had to be funded, clearly. And where would we find funding? We said we would find funding. Remember, VAT was on the cards at the time. Yeah,
no, you say remember, many persons forgot that VAT was on the cards at the time.
Okay, VAT was on the card at the time. So we thought that VAT, when VAT came in, VAT would be an opportunity to raise some additional finance for the health sector. We also thought that the so-called unhealthy taxes, we thought that we could raise more on cigarettes. We thought we could raise on alcohol. We thought we could actually raise on the salt and the sugars, because these are unhealthy products. And in fact, at that time, we were subsidizing.
Yes.
And in fact, we removed the subsidy about a year ago, and we saved $16.7 million by not subsidizing salt and sugar, right? Or rather, sugar,
rice, and flour.
Sugar, rice, and flour. Sorry, right? But we should also have put a tax on salt and a tax on sugar. In my view, I think we could have raised money. I would not tax the rice and the flour, but I would tax those other two.
The sugar
and the salt.
Yes, I know you have spoken about that. In fact, when the Prime Minister announced in the budget that there would be VAT on salt, you were one of the very few voices supporting that move, and you spoke from the health aspect, speaking about what it does and how too much consumption of both the salt and the sugar can lead to further problems down the line in terms of your cost of medication, the demand for these services. Having seen what the public reaction was and the outreach from the opposition, from the ordinary citizen, do you have a change of heart?
No, I don't. There's no doubt. Salt, look, hypertension. You can actually, there's a beautiful paper published, St. Lucia in Latin America and the Caribbean. We had 77.6 deaths per 100,000 from hypertension. Right, that is actually one of the highest in the region, right? 40% of people over the age of 40 have high blood pressure. High blood pressure is very well correlated with salt intake. If you take less than 5 grams of salt a day, which is the recommended salt intake for us as an adult, that actually will reduce. It's one of the most cost-effective public health interventions that you can do, is reduce your salt intake. We actually consume closer to 12 grams a day, which is almost 2.5 times the recommended daily dose for salt, right? So that, if you put a tax on it, you do two things. One, you send a very clear message that salt is a dangerous substance to abuse. I'm not saying you don't need some salt. You
Yes.
cannot get away. You must, salt is in your food. You must have some salt, but it should be less than the 5 grams. But what you send a clear message that it is unhealthy, you also, yes, you make it more expensive. So that also sends a very clear message through the pocket. So not only through the mind, but through the pocket as well, you send a message. You want to use your salt? Well, you'll pay, right? And I think that's an important message. I mean, people can disagree with me. But the point is, let's ask a question. What's the nutritional value of salt? What are we getting out of the salt?
But I think there are many persons who do not know the nutritional value of a lot of things that we consume. In terms of our public health education in that area, I think it is something that is lacking. I think we go through that entire process of our lives until we become adults and we practice what has been handed down into our homes without paying close attention to what is actually happening inside of us when we consume some of the foods that we consume. And we see what is happening in our healthcare. There is a huge demand for a lot of services, and they are related to these illnesses, and we are not in a position to respond, which takes me back to the issue of universal healthcare. Many persons believe that you are not as forceful as you should have been to agitate, to advocate, and to cause the previous administration to move ahead and to implement that
Universal
which they had
healthcare.
inherited.
That's
with
probably
universal
true.
healthcare.
And that's a fair criticism. I'll tell you what happened. When I left office as Chief Medical Officer in January 2007, I had done a briefing with Cabinet on the National Health Strategic Plan and which included universal healthcare. And universal healthcare wasn't just what I spoke about before, because it was integrated into our overall health strategic plan, which spoke about the organization and the management health, the primary healthcare. It was a complete strategy. Anyway, when I briefed the Cabinet, the then Sir John Compton, and it was a stormy meeting in the Cabinet, I might add, because I guess a lot of the Cabinet ministers at the time, they had just come in. I think a lot of people thought that I was a Labourite for whatever reason, right?
Oh.
I don't know why, but you know, because what I was, in my view, was a Chief Medical Officer, right? Not a Labourite or whatever, just a Chief Medical Officer. So when I went in there, but you know who was really great? I must tell you, Sir John Compton. Sir John Compton was great. Sir John, in all the arguments, Sir John, you know what he said at the end? I think he said, Dr. King, just tell the Cabinet, tell the members that without health, they have nothing.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So that was
experience speaking.
That was experience.
Yes.
And then he said, go back and break it down into manageable pieces that we can implement. Because he says, I like the strategy. I can see where you're going with it. I like it, but you got to break it down now into pieces that we can implement. So, and unfortunately, in my view, Sir John soon thereafter left office. And I think we lost one of our advocates. Stephenson King was a big advocate for universal health care.
But he was Prime Minister.
He was Prime Minister. But I think Stephenson King got sidetracked into other things.
Well, there were a lot of things happening.
I think universal
there.
health care. And
yeah.
in all fairness, at that point in time, I think I also got distracted and so that the two kings, for want of a better word, got sidetracked. Because I did not advocate for universal health care as I probably should have.
Yes.
As I am now.
Yes.
Because I've
you see, and people will call you a hypocrite because they're like, wait. 5 years UWP is in office. You said nothing. You basically went under the shadows, and all of a sudden now you found your voice. This is a person they once called a Labourite.
Yeah, but you know why? Because I'll tell you why. One, for a number of reasons. One, when I left CMO, I must tell you, although I was energized, I was also tired coming out, and I wanted some time for my family. I wanted some time to do my medicine, my pathology. I wanted some time to get back.
Understood.
However, now
you're back.
Yes, I'm back.
In full force.
Full force. well, yes, I hope so. But also, Dr. Anthony was a main advocate for universal health care.
Yes.
The St. Lucia Labour Party campaigned universal health care. I remember Labour Party supporters saying, our UHC, during the campaign.
Yes.
Where's our UHC? Now that's still a good question.
Yes.
And I want to carry that question for the people that are still asking it. Where is universal health care?
But having been so involved in the process prior and seeing what happened, we now have to deal with the deterioration of our facilities. We had, for example, the Mental Wellness Center was delayed by so many years because you had this back and forth with China and Taiwan, and we've had so many other complications with St. Jude now going through that whole process of being transitioned into a new facility and so on. Do you think that it is realistic that we would expect today, as we sit and we discuss, that UHC would have already been in full
well, you see,
train?
Because if UHC would help us in all that we're talking about.
Okay.
UHC, if we had started on our UHC program, we would actually be addressing things, because UHC is not necessarily, as you may be thinking, an expense that we have to have. UHC is actually going to save you the money, because UHC was what it was going to do was bring organization and control and order into the health system, which is what we did not have and we still don't have.
Yes.
We don't have that national coordination. UHC was actually going to coordinate not only the hospitals to the community, but it was also, and when I say UHC, I'm talking about UHC and the National Strategic Plan, was also going to bring on board the private sector. Because in a little country like St. Lucia, you need to harness the power of all of your resources, public and private. It's no point having a VH divided from a St. Jude, divided from a Tapion, the private doctors divided from the district medical offices and the health centers. You must understand how to harness all of this power. Yes, each of them operates in a different modus operandi. This one does it this way, this one does it that way. However, you must declare your objectives, and that's what the National Strategic Plan did. These are our objectives in health. And UHC was a strategy how we could even bring the private sector into the delivery of care.
Speaking of the private sector,
of the health service, yes.
Is it wrong for the public to assume that there was not widespread support for UHC among the private practitioners, private doctors?
It's interesting. There was mixed support, and I think that there was support for certain parts of UHC and not for others. A lot of people saw UHC because it was going part of a strategic plan that was going to give more control and more regulation in the health sector. A lot of people may say, oh, I'm not so sure I want to be under, I don't want more government control. That sounds like a more communist regime rather than a democratic free enterprise type. But it wasn't. UHC allowed free enterprise within it, the way in which we intended to structure it. So I just think that a lot of people didn't quite understand. And in fact, our biggest opposition came not so much from private sector, but came from people who felt that we were doing UHC in the pharmaceutical area, in the emergency services, and in the hospitals, and not in the community. That is what a lot of the criticism was. But that in itself was not true. Because what would happen, because we said we're going to put the UHC systems in place in terms of service agreements and the pharmaceuticals and so on and so forth, did not mean that the strategic plan of which UHC was a part of did not talk or did not actually design the reforms of the community health services that were necessary. We did. And it was actually going to, as I was talking about earlier with St. Jude, the way we were going to do it, it was going to force the hospitals, create incentives in the hospital to support the community services. In addition, we were going to structure the community services with the 9 regional health teams, dividing Cashews into 2, because we have 8 health regions, dividing Cashews into 2, 9 health regions that we would have had people, multidisciplinary teams, to do the multidisciplinary type of community health care that is so necessary. In fact, I wanted to say, and something that is near and dear to me, our community health aides.
Yes.
You were talking about Ebola a while ago. Community health aides are our foot soldiers on the front line in primary care. That's how I always saw it. I saw these ladies, all of them are ladies, golden ladies in their golden uniforms, are the ladies that walk into the houses. That is community care. That is primary care. Not you coming to the health center, me coming to your home.
To you.
Have you taken your medication today, JDR? How's your daughter?
Yes.
How's your son? I saw your son with them boys over there smoking that marijuana. Let's talk to your boy. Mm-hmm. Okay? Now, that is primary care. That, in my view. And that is what we wanted to see. And that is why, so all of that was part of the strategic plan of which UHC was a part. Because what we realized was the hospitals, which consume over 50% of the health budget, were actually moving in an unregulated fashion, sucking the budgets. And we felt that much as the budget was, the hospitals were under budgeted. That is true. But the point is, until you have a system that defines the service agreements, so the hospital knows it's getting its money, and you know you're getting a service for money, then everybody becomes clear. And the hospital is properly funded, you're getting the service you want for your people, and everything is okay. And it doesn't matter whether that's a private, public, or in-between hospital.
Understood.
You see, because you can create the environment which is fair, equitable, and can do the right thing. And that is so important, because if you want to address the problems in this country, and people can criticize me for that, you have to address inequality. And the way you address inequality, that is what UHC was going to do, address inequality. Because there are people who don't have access to services that they should have access to. And you have people that die and suffer in the country because they don't have access to those services, because they don't have the money. They have to do blockers and country and western and beg to get the money to go into the radiotherapy for their breast cancer. Or don't get it, for that matter.
And die.
And die.
Yes.
That is inequality. And that is what we were going to do with UHC. And it was implemented through that national strategic plan. And that is why I must say I was angry, and maybe that's the wrong word, but yes, I was. I was angry with the previous government for not doing it, and I'm angry with this one for not doing it.
Yes. I'm hoping that this would be the plea that would cause the wheels to move a little faster, because I know that the project has not been abandoned and there are different things that are happening right now, but I know many persons, given what they are facing now, would agree that it is not moving as fast as they would like it to move. When we speak about access and we speak about the cost of healthcare, there are those who are calling for regulation in terms of the fees that are being charged by the private doctors. There are individuals who would say, I just cannot understand why I would have to pay $150 for that visit, and I am prescribed medication that would cost me $25. So while Dr. King is advocating for the removal of VAT on medicine, which I appreciate, I would wish if he would lend his very powerful voice, and his voice that is able to make things happen, I might add, to that whole discussion on the cost of the services, the cost of the services of our private doctors, the cost of the services at our labs and so on, because we do recognize that there are limitations in the public sector as it relates to the demand, the length of time that you wait for care, and so on. Do you think that the time has come, or do you think it is right that government should have a hand in there, or that your colleagues should perhaps have some form of self-regulation that would cause their services to be more accessible?
I think it has to be self-regulation. Now, if you believe in market forces, competition, in other words, between private practitioners demands that they cannot charge whatever they want.
Okay.
And they must deliver services so that people still come to them. Because otherwise you'll not go to your doctor if you pay $150 and he or she doesn't give you the kind of services that you want. So you're already, the way a capitalist system works is the market forces do determine the prices that people will charge. That's one. Two, you have to look at the cost of the operation. If government wants to have a hand, and in fact, in one of the papers, the PAHO papers done by Barrett put out, we talk about that, where what government can do, and there's nothing wrong with this, government can enter into arrangements with private practitioners and with private facilities, labs, hospitals or otherwise, x-ray facilities and so on, and create, if you see that for some reason there's a reason to want to have this private sector partner on board, you create a memorandum of understanding with them. You can do cross subsidies to them because you know their cost. So for instance, I run a lab. If the lab overall, over a year, costs me, let us say, $3.8 million to run, I must make at least $3.8 million, right?
Yes, yes.
Otherwise I go out of business.
Yes.
That's private sector. So government can see that. If government wants to work with me and they want to have an agreement with me, they say, Dr. King, I want you to drop your lab fees by 50%. I say, okay, fine. It cost me $3.8 million to produce. You've seen how efficient I am. You've looked at all my efficiencies. I cannot make any more efficiencies. Or maybe I can come down to 3.5. You want me to cut my cost down to 1.8? You're going to have to meet me. You're going to have to give me 1.7. So, in other words, if government wants it, government must come to those agreements.
There are things government want that government really cannot pay for. That government simply does not have the capacity to pay for.
But we have private insurance.
So then, yes, and so for those who do not have the insurance and simply are not able to meet that cost, and you have services that are available on island, but only in the private sector. Now, this is one of the limitations we have.
I love that. If it's only available in the private sector, you see, if I'm in government and that service is only available in the private sector, I go there and I see how I can make an arrangement so my people can have access to those services. I will make that arrangement. And I can make that arrangement in a whole host of ways. There are things, there are concessions I can do. There are arrangements I can make because government has power. There are things I can do for that private sector partner that will make them come to the table at a cost which we are all happy with. And in a private sector venture, for instance, if you can guarantee me money, I can actually do a lot for you, because one of the problems in private sector is you don't know day to day what's going to happen. There's an uncertainty in private business. Where there's risk. If government shares some of that risk with me through a memorandum of understanding, then we have a service agreement. And that's okay. So it's a matter of talking. It's a matter of communication. Come to the table, let's talk, and let us see what we can do. Nobody's going to BS anybody, because these are the facts. Once you deal with the truth and the facts, we can come to an arrangement. And I think it is time to do that. I don't think that I would not support a private sector running rabid and digging out people's eyes, just like I would not support the unfair bashing of private sector. You must understand that the cost of providing some of these services is high. Go to a doctor in the United States, you'll see. Now, in addition, let's come back to let's go back to private insurance, because remember, we buy our stuff from the United States and these places too. Yes. Let me tell you, come back to the private insurances. Private insurance is a financing mechanism that has not been developed properly in our country. Again, government and can come in there. So, for instance, Victoria Hospital fees, which are completely subsidized.
Yes. Why
should private insurance be paying a subsidized fee at Victoria Hospital and not the real fee at Victoria Hospital? If it costs $5,000 to do a hysterectomy at Victoria Hospital, private insurance, and somebody comes in private, they should pay $5,000, and that should be first call. If you have private insurance, that's first call. Not the NIC contribution, not the government subsidy. Your private insurance should be first call. So to me, government has to sit.
The discussion has to be broader than just the doctors and the services. Right. We need to look at all the forces that would create.
That's right.
You know, I understand.
And in fact, we could incentivize. Government can incentivize employers to have private insurance, and that private insurance can be paying the real costs, be it in the public or the private sector, so that there will be more finance coming in to support the health sector and giving access to people. So these are all the things that I think we are not doing, and I would like to see done. All of that was part of what we were talking about in healthcare back in 2004, 5, and 6.
Yes, and so in 2014, you believe that we've gone nowhere?
I don't think we've gone anywhere much, apart from, I think we've come to the realization that we must do it. Well, that's good. Because maybe before it was, we wish we could do it.
Yes.
Now I think we've come to a point.
It's a necessity. We really cannot move beyond.
You see, because Ebola, let me come back to Ebola to link it back for you. Ebola, and I was talking with WHO, has shown how inequality in the world hurts.
Yes.
It hurts you. Because look at West Africa. West Africa is hurting all of us because of the inequality that has poor systems. When Liberia has one physician for 71,000 people, that's equivalent of having 2.5 doctors in St. Lucia.
Wow.
Imagine if St. had 2.5 doctors.
But that's scary. And then you understand why we are where we are, because they simply do not have the capacity to deal with the problem that is confronting them, and that is why they would need, and not just want, they would need the outside help in order to bring this thing under control. We have Cuba responding, 463
which is beautiful.
Healthcare workers, nurses and doctors going across there so far. Dr. King, the quality of healthcare in St. Lucia, I don't think a week would go by if we do not hear some form of complaint. Whether it be in the news or persons who are making comments, social media and otherwise, they complain. Sometimes the complaint is not necessarily about the quality of care, but how they are received. Basic things, customer relations and so on. Do you have any concerns about the quality of healthcare that St. Lucians are getting at our VH, at St. Jude, and so on?
Let me back that up for you, and across the board. Somebody asked me a question: how should you do customer care? You do customer care by looking after your workers, first and foremost. So what must happen, in my view? Because I do understand. In fact, let me back it up one more time. When you look at quality of care, in quality of health care, there are two elements. There's technical quality and there's perceived quality.
Okay.
So there's the customer, the uninformed customer, when I say so, the patient,
yes,
comes in, they perceive quality. A doctor or a healthcare provider, a technical person reviewing what was actually done for that person could say, oh, technically this was perfect, perfectly right. Everything was done correct. Right right diagnosis, right medication.
On time.
Everything perfect. But the attitude of the healthcare provider means that the perceived care that the person felt they got substandard care because they were not treated as the face was sour.
Yes.
They were left to wait for 2 hours or whatever, and when you shut up there, you know, whatever, right? Okay, you know, whatever. So
I had to laugh at that one. I've never heard such a bold statement, I must say. So I think so far we may not be perfect, but so far I don't think we've had cases like that in our hospitals.
Fair enough, but,
yes,
but the point is taken.
Yes,
you feel that way, okay?
Yes,
so the person felt that way. Now that is important. But the truth is, our healthcare workers are stressed and stretched. Our nurses, I have great empathy for them. I feel for them. I feel for the doctors too. You know what it is to not be sure what your pharmacy has stocked, to know if you write a prescription, they can't get it there. You know what it is to know you want the lab test, it not come in. You know, every time you're sitting in a little hot, dark, dirty little place trying to deliver your healthcare, which is your office. You know what I mean? So our workers are working under stress, in a stressful environment. The patients themselves are upset, so there's tension.
Mm-hmm.
That does not augur well for good customer service. So back to what I was saying, what should you do? If you're an employer and you want to have good customer care, look after your workers. What do your workers require? Your workers must feel that you are supporting them, that you are there for them, that you'll do everything for them. When they make a call and say, look, we really need to address this. We need to address Ebola. Come to me. I am on the front line. I am your employee on the front line. Come to me. If you want to do something, come to me. Listen to me. Don't just maybe side with the public for political or public relations reasons. Mm-hmm. Look at me and deal with me in a fair, proper manner as a responsible professional who deserves the conditions so that I can deliver in a manner in which I was trained to deliver. The frustration of not being able to deliver what you know you must drives our people to hopelessness. You mentioned hopelessness in our youth, but a lot of that happens too in our healthcare services.
Yeah.
Be it at St. Jude, or be it at VH, or be it in community, or even at Tapion. You get it everywhere because people don't feel that they're being supported as they should.
I wanted to speak about that. There is a perception that the quality of care is better at the private institutions, the private labs, the private doctors, and so on, as opposed to the public institutions. Now, I know that this is not something that is limited to the local context. In fact, if you do public health care, you'll realize that this is one of the battles, and you are involved in both,
yeah,
both public and private. And this is a reality for many of our medical doctors. They have private practice, but they also serve as you know, they serve in the hospitals, district medical officers, and so on. And people would tell you the quality of care I will get at Dr. Stephen King's office at Tapia is not what I get when I go to see him at VH.
Okay.
He does not have the time. I have not even sat yet and he's writing the prescription. Mm-hmm. You hear these kinds of stories.
I understand.
What do you think? First of all, is it something you have recognized? Do you believe that it is a fair comment and a fair assessment of how our doctors behave in the public versus the private setting? I don't
think it's completely fair, but again, it's a perception. So the public out there will be nodding their heads right now saying JJ is right.
I think you have your your hand on the pulse.
Right? But the truth is, like I was speaking to before, the thing is, in the private sector, generally speaking, the administration, because usually it's the owner, you might be the owner and the operator. So it's more responsive. You need to get this, you get it, and you have it to apply.
Yes.
In the public sector, you have this long chain of command. So I must now speak to the hospital administrator, who must speak to the permanent secretary, who must speak to the permanent secretary or director of finance, who then say, well, we don't have that right now, that's not the priority, go back. So 3 months later, I hear down why I am in the lab at Ezra Long, there's not a priority for government to do this, so you can't get that reagent that you needed 3 months ago. So 3 months have passed and you haven't been able to deliver a service. You see, so
yes.
the responsiveness in the private sector to the
Time
needs
lag.
of the customer is better. And that translates into what the customer feels as better care. But that can be resolved. I actually think there's room in this country for both public and private, good public care and good private care. But I think both administrations, that is both in the public administration and the private administration, must be far more responsive. And I think the public sector can learn something from the private sector, not so much in, or like sometimes when I was CMO, I used to quarrel with the people at the ministry a lot. That's at the policy meeting. Because they say, oh, they'll go and pay $150 at a thing, and they don't want to pay $10 at a health center or
yes.
whatever, right? Or $20 at emergency room. But I tell them, no, that's foolishness. You cannot compare the public to the private sector in terms of price like that, you know. What you have to do is actually not create that kind of comparison and say, look, that is the private care, that's how they deliver it. Let's understand it and deal with it. This is in the public sector, how we have to do it. And we must be more responsive in the public sector to the needs of our patients in that public sector. And if the administration was more responsive and more supportive, and I'm not saying that they're doing it because they don't have a mind to do it. I think they do it because, yes, they are constrained, but I think that is the reason. And I think the frustration negatively impacts on customer service, plus the physical environment. Now, we can address the physical environment with the 2 new hospitals we're building,
yes.
with the new health centers that we have been building, some
yes.
of which are beautiful,
yes.
right? Under the whole, that's part of the whole infrastructure development we spoke about and started many years ago,
yes.
in fact.
Yes.
And it's good. It will improve. I do think that our public sector will improve. But what I don't, and I want to try and put it on the table if I can, I don't like the negative towards the private and the negative towards the public. I think the time has come in our country to be far more positive about both. What can we do to make both the public and the private sector better to respond to the national needs and to the patient needs? And that is what we wanted to do with the strategic plan and with universal healthcare. Not to marginalize the private sector, or any such thing, but rather to embrace both, control both, regulate both. Because we're talking about having auditing, accreditation, regulation to ensure that people give the kind of services
we
they
need
require.
both.
We need both.
Yes.
And we're talking about proper financing, all that kind of stuff. So that people, and transparency, that word that is overused, but transparency so the public could see, well, yes, we're getting value for money wherever we turn. Where do we go to the private sector? Because I choose to go there because I can choose JD as my doctor rather than having to go to VH and whoever they give me.
Yeah.
You may want that choice. You may want a different kind of environment. You have that choice to go there with your private insurance or with your private money. That's your business. And you should always have that choice, in my view. I don't think we should ever try to kill the private sector. I think that's dangerous to try and kill the private sector. And sometimes you get that feeling that people want to do that. Because when we were looking at universal healthcare and the whole strategic plan, one of the things that you had to give up, and when we did our consultations, people quarreled about that. One of the things you had to give up was your choice. You didn't have a choice of provider. When we capitated you and we assigned you to VH
yes.
catchment area, it's VH you had to go.
Yes.
If you went anywhere else, you'd have to pay. VH St. Jude or Tapion or anywhere else, you'd pay. So people were upset about that. But to me, private sector gives you choice. The public sector just gives you the guaranteed package of services with certain service standards that we've agreed to and we regulate and we control.
Great. We have come to the end of our second segment. We'll go to a commercial break. When we come back, we'll be taking your calls so that you can get in on the discussion. I saw that the phone lines were flashing, and so there are many of you who are out there anxious to get your voice in with questions or comments. We'll do that right after this commercial break. Stay in touch. We'll be right back. Welcome back to In Touch. Thank you for joining us. A show that I wish would never end, really. I'm sitting across from Dr. King and I'm watching him light up. He gets so excited and animated when he's speaking about, matters related to health. Our number is on the screen for 527-347. We are taking your calls, any questions that you may have or comments that you would want to make. If you want to add to our discussion, feel free to do so again for 527-347. Again, we're streaming live, www.choice39.tv. It is not too late to join the program, so you can let them know that Dr. Stephen King is on. Good night. Thank you for staying in touch. You're our first caller.
Yes, good night.
Good night.
Ms. Emmanuel and Dr. King.
Good night.
Yes, I agree with what Dr. King said about the designated place, because it will be safe for the patients and visitors coming into the hospital. I
Yes.
think that will give them a peace of mind. Okay, another thing is that the doctor in New York who has contracted the Ebola, I was wondering if he was not wearing protective gears. All right?
Thank you so much for that.
That's a good question. Clearly, there must have been a breach. I have not heard where there was a breach, but clearly he was exposed, so there must have been a breach. And that's the problem, because, in those PPEs, it's hot, you can get tired, you day in, day out, you're working, you're sweating inside there, you're stressed sometimes. And, it's easy in those environments to make a mistake. Like when you're leaving your shift, you're coming off and you're going into decontamination. And that is why it's so important to have the monitor, that's the supervisor, and the buddies. So even if you're tired, somebody can say, hey, JD, no. Careful,
Yes.
don't
Yes.
touch that. Stop, do this. So, so that, because it happens. Healthcare workers, we are human beings. We get tired, we get stressed, we get depressed, just like everybody else. Our productivity fluctuates from day to day, just like everybody else. And our minds can sometimes drop the ball. And so maybe that happened to him.
Yeah, maybe. And I know in the other cases there have been suggestions that there were breaches in the Eric Duncan situation, that there was a breach, and there is just so much that we need to keep up with. But in your line of work, as
Postmortems?
yes, do you wear what kind of
It's good.
equipment do you wear?
We do, but Ebola is causing us to think twice. And we actually, it's funny, today, Malachi, Chiva, and I were talking, and we were saying that, we've got, and Dr. Felician came in, because Dr. Felician's the young pathologist just back with us now,
Yes, yes, yes.
solution just back.
Yes.
It's great to have him back. So we were saying we need to come together and redesign our system to make sure that we are better protected. Because it's not just when you have Ebola, it's all the other things you have. Rumsfeld says it well, the unknown unknowns. There are things that we healthcare workers get exposed to that we don't even know what the consequences are. We're on the front line every day getting exposed to things. And these things could cause endless damage, disease, or death. We don't know yet.
Yes.
So that is why this has reminded us our basic precautions must be up to speed.
Indeed. We'll take another call. Good night. Thank you for calling.
Hey, good evening.
Good evening.
It's a pleasure listening to both of you all and having this constructive conversation. I believe right now St. Lucians are really frightened about this Ebola situation.
Yes.
And any information that can be given is a good thing. But I have some reservations when it comes to the building of a new facility to house or handle the Ebola situation. I was wondering, and I'm thinking here as a young person, I'm saying, aren't we in a strategically good or area whereby we have two hospitals in the north, basically. One in construction, close to being finished, and an old one which the staff and the machinery and everything will be moved to the new one.
Yes.
Wouldn't it be a better idea if whatever works that is being done at the new hospital, and I'm sure it's not much to be done, it's remedial works, wouldn't it be better if we have our equipment and everything that not rushed, but you try and speed up the process of getting the new hospital on stream, switching everything from VH to that hospital, and putting VH as a Ebola treatment hospital, and basically saving a little money there, getting the equipment, maybe that would be used for a new facility, and maybe would have space for expansion if this crisis ever comes to a point whereby we would have to maybe take up the whole hospital for treatment of this. I believe we really need to think about this. Putting just a facility for Ebola, whereas we have a very large building that will be soon, will probably be vacant. It should, to me, the people in authorities, the heads or the should be, think of putting the facility right there at Victoria. If they need to get security, they get security put in place to make sure that people don't leave on or come in and out of the facility. But I find Victoria is a very large building and it should be used. Maybe.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, caller. Dr. King?
I love that comment, but I agree with him except the other way around. Right? We need to respond right now because a case could come tomorrow. Okay? So I would say use the empty New National for this particular Ebola emergency. And he's right. So don't build a new facility necessarily. Use the existing New National, which is available. Use that, because we're not rich, right? Although the prefab structures being put up is not our money, it's PAHO money, but still, it's an opportunity cost. That money could have gone for something else. But anyway, fair enough. Use the New National, and when you see we do move across next year, then he's quite right. The old VH, which can remain as a health facility, we can actually create an isolation facility and even a quarantine facility back at the old VH. That is possible. But I think it's the other way around. I think use the New National now because we need to respond right now. We don't have time to do the transfer. There's a big deal he's talking about. You can't do that overnight.
It would take much to do the transfer, but I noticed that in the public domain there is some reservation about using the new facility to treat Ebola.
Why?
That you need to let's have our hospital where everybody can come into the new hospital and use the old hospital for Ebola. This is
not a couch from courts that you say, don't sit on it. Don't put your foot on it, right? This is a building designed to do just that.
Yes.
It's designed to do
just
that.
And there is a process. You can decontaminate.
There's no problem.
Yes.
Don't be worried. It's beautiful. It's set. It's ready to go. Good waste management systems in place. Everything set. Everything there. Just use it.
This is what the public needs to know. Good night. Thank you for staying in touch.
Hi. Good evening. Good evening to Jadia and your host, your guest, Dr. King. Sorry.
Yes.
JD, I must commend you on a great show this evening.
Thank you.
I must say that I'm quite impressed with both of you and the level of discourse this evening.
Thank you very much.
But Dr. King, I would just like to know your views on the Cuban nurses and the quality of training.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Let me tell you, I was one of the supporters at the time because the nurses who went over, the people who went over to Cuba to be trained as nurses, I was chief medical officer and Nurse Jolie was the principal nursing officer at the time. So we were part of that process.
Yes.
I think that nurses are such an important set of professionals that I would support nurses trained virtually anywhere. So I do support the Cuban trained nurses. I understand that nurses need to pass the regional board. But I think we could make accommodation for the nurses coming back while they do their regional board so that they could also have their regional nursing certification. I understand that. Because you see, through it all, yes, we are part of CARICOM. Yes, we are regional. I understand all of that. But we're also sovereign. And we also have national needs. We have a nursing shortage. We have nursing needs. We cannot afford to have trained people not applied in their profession. So to me, we had to find a way to bring the nurses into operation.
They had a tough time.
Yes, even while we get the other certification in place. And I think we can do that. I remember Dr. Anthony when we were having this very discussion prior to sending the nurses, and Nurse Jolie would even bear me out on this, and I'm sure Dr. Anthony would bear me out on this too. You know what he told us? He said, look, we are a sovereign nation. Sovereign nations can do what they want to do in their interest if they have to. And he says, and he is prepared to do that. And I think we should, because at the end of the day, this is a simple thing. We're looking at patient outcomes. We're looking at patient care for patient outcomes and applying people in the best possible manner. And we must move away from discrimination and stigmatization. Because you're Cuban trained does not mean you're not as good as a non-Cuban trained. that's foolishness. Cuba trains great professionals. We all know that. Doctors, nurses, and that's not an issue, right? So it's just a matter of meeting our regional obligations, and I'm sure we can do that too. So I think that. So my simple answer to you is that our Cuban trained nurses should be operating right now.
Good night, and thank you for staying in touch.
Hi, good evening.
Hello.
Good evening.
On the matter of what Dr. T is discussing, I know of certain Cuban nurses who came back and they are yet to find employment.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, many of them took loans to go and study, and they are yet to find any kind of an employment.
I understand, and this is
the
something.
money that they had, the food.
Yes.
So
yes,
I would
Paula.
like to know what the government is currently doing on that matter, because it's not their fault they cannot find work,
Agreed.
because they have written the exam and awaiting results, have done it and have failed. So what kind of accommodation is made for them at this moment?
And
Thank you so much for that.
I fully agree, and I think there are a number of ways in which government, it's money, that's the other thing. But when we send people to train, we should also make accommodations for when they come back. If we send them to train for the public sector, we should have made those provisions, right? Yes, we cannot predict the economic...
And these provisions should transcend administration.
But of course.
It should be a policy that is written and accepted, that these individuals have been afforded scholarships to go and study because of a need in the public sector when they return. Whether it is Dr. Anthony as Prime Minister, whether it is Honorable Stevenson King, it should not be left up to the personal feelings of a Minister for Health or a nursing association.
No.
However, the policy should be set, and these individuals should be allowed to transition into the system while we make provisions for them.
That's right. And I agree with meeting regional obligations. I understand meeting all obligations, but I know that there are creative ways of bringing these nurses into employment while we get them to meet the regional obligations. I am sure we could do that. It takes political will, but it takes, you know, I was saying in Monroe's speech the other day, and I quoting Martin Luther King, you know what we need in our leaders? Hard-minded, soft-hearted people. Hard-minded so you can do the proper thinking and write the proper policies, but compassionate so you understand what people go through.
Yes.
And we should understand what those nurses have gone through. Their aspirations, their dreams being fulfilled to go and do nursing in Cuba, with the promise that they will be able to work as nurses when they return, to come back home and find their hopes dashed.
Yes, because very few of them are working. Some of them have failed the exam, and so they really do not know where to go to next, because I think there is a maximum number of times that you can write the exam. Some of them have left St. Lucia and are employed out of St. Lucia. And when you see the Cuban trained nurses are employed in Canada, in the US, it makes you wonder what exactly is wrong with our system.
Yep.
What is wrong that the quality of their education can be applied to the Canadian and to the American context and cannot be applied to the St. Lucian context.
And we need to sit with the Nursing Council, who is our regulatory authority, and have that discussion and negotiation with them, because we must respect our Nursing Council, but we must work with the Nursing Council in the best interest of all. And I think that's a discussion that, if it hasn't happened, I suspect it has, but it probably has not happened with the parameters and the discussions that it should really have to come to a resolution. You don't sit at a table not to come to a resolution. You sit at a table, as I say, hard-minded, soft-hearted, hard-minded and compassionate to come to a decision, a conclusion that works for all.
Yes.
Win-win for all.
Indeed, agreed. Good night, thank you for calling.
Good evening. I'd like to make a comment.
Go ahead. Hello?
Hello.
I just want to say this is a really good show.
Thank you.
And I just want to make 3 points, really.
Sure.
The new National Hospital is, in fact, the perfect location for the Ebola isolation for a couple of reasons. It has its own incineration. It has a self-contained waste management. And it means that no Ebola-infected material has to leave the compound. That couldn't happen at Victoria Hospital because none of these things are in place in Victoria Hospital. And I think it's very important that the St. Lucian public understands that.
Wow. Yes.
People are worried about the new national hospital getting contaminated if we get Ebola. But it's not about contamination because it's very easy to decontaminate a site. However, transporting Ebola-infected material off-site to incinerate is potentially dangerous and puts so many people at risk.
Very
Thanks.
good point.
Yes.
Very good point. Thanks for that.
Are you still? Oh, thank you so much for that contribution, and it could not be any clearer.
That was clear.
Yes, and sounds like someone who's very much aware as to what exactly is there and how it can be used. Good night. Thank you for calling.
Hi, good night, Julia.
Hello.
And good night, Dr. King.
Good night.
A little humor first, Dr. King. You can pass for a labor anytime because they tell the truth. first.
Ouch! Ouch!
Just laugh. Just laugh at that.
King,
Just laugh.
Dr. King, looking at what President Obama have done, appointed somebody to actually, create oversight for Ebola in America. Do you think it is time for small countries like St. Lucia to appoint somebody like you, yourself, to just undertake, to oversee Ebola? Because right now we have the chief medical officer. She has her duties to actually create oversight for different things in the country. Do you think it is time for somebody like yourself or the Prime Minister, Dr. Anthony, to use his wisdom and appoint somebody who can solely just dedicate their time to that? Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank you, Paul.
I think that with the national committee that the CMO has put in place, we're going to meet tomorrow afternoon. I think if the CMO can do this,
Okay.
and we can work with her and we can make it so, I think it's just a matter of bringing, as you say, the science and good communication, good understanding, and to develop a good plan and then go forward. I think we can. I always prefer to try to use the systems that we have rather than try to inflict parallel systems on top of things, if you know what I mean. To create a separate system
and
a separate
this,
to me it undermines and it takes away from the capacity, building the capacity in the existing system to
So
respond.
your preference is that we work within the
CMO.
established parameters? And,
Yes,
okay.
I prefer that, right? And for that to happen, we must sit at a table with mutual respect, being able to disagree
Yes.
firmly.
So there must be adequate support
Yes.
from the professionals, from the health professionals, because it would be one thing for the ministry to be making strides and to feel that they've been undermined by the professionals, that
Yes.
they've been undermined by those who practice medicine, that those who are actually in there, because what the message it would send to the public is that, yes, the officials are saying this, yes, they're saying that, but I am frontline, I am a doctor, I've been practicing for so many years and I can tell you this is not so. So you see there is a potential for confusion and for people to really be scared of to what the possible outcome will be. So it is extremely important that all of us are on one page.
Yes, right. We must come together. I will support the CMO 100% in this response. And I think all the doctors would do that. All we are saying is let's come together, let's have a good plan that's based on science. We are not panicked, right? Yes, we may have, obviously there's a certain amount of fear, but we have the courage. We do this every day. We doctors and nurses, we're not afraid from that point of view to go and deal with people with Ebola. We will manage them. We will do it, right? All we are saying is let us apply the science and apply what we already know to make sure that it is as safe as it can be. Because it's only foolish to leave it unsafe and just dive in like an idiot and get sick. That does not make sense when you know what needs to be done. So that's all we're saying. Let's come together, do this thing right, and we support our CMO 100% on the matter. And I expect that's what, in fact, I know that's where we're going to go.
Yes. Are you confident that St. Lucia has the ability, we spoke about the capacity of our doctors and nurses a little while ago, but are you confident that if we are to be faced with a case of Ebola, that the care that is given to that individual would be at a standard that we perhaps would not be in an unfortunate situation where that patient would die? There are those who believe that it does not matter what government do. Dr. King can speak about units and treatment and so on. Anybody who lands in St. Lucia and would have to be treated at a local facility would die. Is that your view?
No. Let me tell you, Ebola does not demand fancy care. Ebola demands basic care. It is basically maintaining the hydration status, the fluid, the electrolytes, and the nutritional status. is really supportive care. Forget all the ZMAP and all those other immunoglobulins and all those other things. That's not the crucial thing. The crucial thing is basic care, doing the basic care very well. New England Journal has a beautiful article. Do our basics superbly well is how you save people. Yes, at least 50% or maybe 30% might die even with the best of supportive care. And that's the nature of the disease, and we understand that. And can we do it? Yes, we can do that. Now, I don't want people to feel out there that, hey, it's all okay. It's not okay. We don't want to have to do it. We hope we never have to do it. But if we have to do it, we will do it. But we want to make sure we do it with the best preparation in place. We are coming to the party late in the game. We've seen already what's happening. We're walking in now, seeing what works. We will be foolish not to learn from what the others have done to put in place here. When we have the opportunity, we have a beautiful, like a previous caller said, we have that new national facility sitting down there. We have greater opportunity than probably any other country right now in terms of an isolation facility. Yes. Because we have this empty hospital.
And who knows, when the other OACS countries speak of a regional response, maybe they are in our hospital as well.
Maybe. But I must tell you, I don't want people to think that this is an easy thing. This is not an easy thing. This is not a glib, I'm not being glib about it. We must put it in place. But even when Ebola comes, it will challenge us. No doubt about that. It will challenge us, our character, as well as our ability as a nation and as a system to respond. We don't want to have to do it. It will be a big challenge. We don't even know if we'll meet that challenge. But we will prepare for that challenge. That is what we need to do, prepare. And we have not done that yet. We are beginning to do that now. So I'm hoping that over the next few days, the solutions will see the preparations that need to be put in place. But I want to reinforce for the people who say they're afraid, remember, this is a greater risk for those who have to care for sick people. Families who choose to care for people at home, that's a problem, because we don't have to do that now. Healthcare workers and people who have to move dead bodies. These are the people who are the greatest risk, yes. Not the general public.
And if we look at how it has been spread and the cases in the US and Spain and so on, healthcare workers.
Yeah, and even in the West Africa, it is the families and the close contacts of
they keep the patient at home.
Who get exposed.
No choice.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now we have a choice, or we can give ourselves the choice. But our choice should not be to care for Ebola patients in and among others. I don't think that's not a good decision.
Yes.
That's not a good decision. And so that's why.
Good night. Thank you for calling In Touch.
Yes. Good evening. Good
Hello.
evening.
Good evening.
Hey, Mr. Emmanuel and Dr. King, how are you doing?
Fine, thank you, sir.
Good. I wanted to go back to the question of the trained nurses, the Cuban trained nurses.
Yes.
Do we have any statistics as to how many of them are not able to pass the regional examination? Because if we know that, then we can determine whether it is the selection process from the beginning or the structure of the nursing courses or program that they take in Cuba. So do we have any statistics on that, Dr. King? Because that can give us an idea of how to deal with the problem.
You have a point, and I
yes.
don't know. But I still think that no matter what, there must be some way in which we can find value in people who have undergone was it a 3-year program?
Some of them 5.
In Cuba. They
yes.
must have learned something. And we must be able to apply that knowledge somehow in a proper manner. So, and if they cannot pass the exam, we need to find out why, as you say, was it a selection problem? Was it a training problem? What is it? But yes. I'm sure we can do that analysis, because I do not know how many, to be honest with you.
And they would have had to pass in order to be issued a degree or a certificate from Cuba. And Cuba in itself has its own standards. But that's a very, very interesting thing. And I think we can explore that.
We should look into that.
We can look at the number of students, how many times they've written the exam, which component of the exam presents the most challenge.
That's right.
Because in the analysis of the exams and in speaking with some of the students, I noted that there was one paper that they were writing over and over and over. And from the first attempt, there are those who had difficulties with translation and so on. So a number of issues, but I think what is important is that they're brought to the table. They cannot be left to,
Yeah.
to feel that they've been forgotten or that their contribution is not needed. And I can tell you, Prime Minister has met with some of them are very frustrated. I know recently some of them attempted the exam, which was their last attempt, and they are waiting results. So I think coming out of that process, when the results are out, then we would know how many of them would have made it through and how many are left and how the government can proceed on that matter. Good night, thank you for calling in touch.
Yes, I would like to direct my question to Dr. King, please.
Sure, sure.
My question to Dr. King is, what is in place? Because, yes, it is a global issue, but I know we have rich people and there are poor people. So I want to know whether preferences will be given to a certain class of people. And my next question is, since we have the new Ebola issue, I follow CNN all throughout the day and I pay attention to what is being done.
Yes.
What I'm saying is, if we should have an Ebola case in St. Lucia, do we have a special set of nurses that are well trained to handle these people? Especially if you have a child, and you know, mother and children are connected, and when they have to take away these children in isolation, what is in place there for these parents to be there by their children? Because with the help of the parent, that child may live. But without the parent, the child is going to be neglected by a set of people that are strangers. So I want to know what is in place here in St. Lucia. And I want to know what is the medical, since there is no vaccine, what really, because I'm hearing they're talking only about insulation and quarantine, but I'm not there saying what is the treatment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, to answer the last bit, the treatment is supportive care, which is the fluids and nutritional support and pain support and, you know, blood support for low platelets and these sorts of things, plasma if necessary. So that's, so in other words, supportive care. Yes, we have nurses who can do this work, but like we said earlier, we need to train the teams in the specialized body substance precautions so they can be very comfortable, well, safe as they treat. In terms of children, when we isolate, we would have there would be no room for the parents in the isolation area. In the hot zone, as they call it, only the sick people and the immediate carers will be there, not the parents. That would be my take on it. Other people may disagree with me, but I'm giving you my personal views at this point in time. What I believe is the science of things, because you don't want to put the mother or the father at risk. Right? And I'm sad to say that's how it have to be. And I don't agree with the caller that it means that the child would be less likely or more would be neglected, because the carers will be there to look after the child. In terms of class, just like the virus knows no class, the treatment must know no class. Because Ebola, you cannot, because somebody is poor, you can't deny them care, because that's foolishness. You're now creating risk for everybody. So even the rich people will surely understand that poor people must get into care. So the class doesn't even factor in to this matter at all. So I think those were her three questions.
Yeah, but there's a way class can factor in. We have seen in some other countries where you have the rich making contributions to a fund that the various governments would use to assist, because we do recognize that there are challenges worldwide in terms of getting the finances. And so do you believe that, given our constraints now, that we perhaps should issue out a call to those who are able to make contributions, monetary contributions to an Ebola fund in St. Lucia?
I think when we put the plan together and we see what it costs, and there'll be nothing wrong with that if it came to that. I see nothing wrong with when you talk about a national response. There are those of us who will have to respond to patients. There are those of us who will have to respond in terms of putting cash in to make things happen. Just like so I see no problem with that. It may well be something to be done. Let's see what demand the plan puts in terms of finance.
Sure. Good night. Thank you for staying in touch.
All right. Good night.
Hello.
To Dr. King.
Hello,
as all before me have alluded, it's a very interesting discourse. I think the discussion has been very broad-based, so looking into the medical field. Dr. King, I've followed your contributions, your recommendations, and your work for some time now. I think you are not just very passionate about healthcare and so on, which is being passionate is very good, but you're very knowledgeable, and there's some very concrete ideas that have come out over the years. What I would hope, I mean, here is an excellent discussion tonight, but what happens beyond tonight? Who would be listening and who would be willing to build that cat with you? That is a very, very, very important and critical thing that we hurdle that we need to move past. We are speaking about the Ebola, and it's interesting that we are learning, and it's good. I hope that there are a number of St. Lucians listening to this show, especially tonight, because it's very, very important in light of what is happening. And we are talking about the exposure and the danger, especially to the responders.
Yes.
Now, what I would hope would be happening at this stage, that there is a sort of a venue that's dedicated to training as far as the proper procedures, as far as being able to put that protective gear on, being able to work with it and so on. Because if it is only when it happens that people are exposed to spending, an extensive period with that protective, then it becomes especially uncomfortable for them, and that is where maybe some of the mistakes can happen because they're not comfortable. So I'm hoping that there would be training dedicated, that people probably they could spend as much time as possible, not just train once and you forget it, that they need to do it over and over and over. And it is a saying that proper practice makes perfect. Not just practice makes perfect. Proper practice makes perfect. Finally, let me just say once again, I hope that that discussion can continue. It could take the same level of interest with Dr. King, among the other medical practitioners and so on, that they too can jump on board and to spread that message, to be interested themselves, so that as many St. Lucians as possible could be properly educated, properly informed, and that we don't go into that panic mode. So once again, I want to say it has been very interesting listening, and I hope that that discussion and the actions, the follow-up actions, will move into place.
Thank you so much for your contribution, Paula.
I fully agree with you, especially that thing about the dedicated and specialized training. And so the sooner we have, and I think that should be done preferably in the designated facility, so people become very familiar with their very surroundings where they're doing their work. So it's really, that's why I think it's so important. I must tell you that many of my colleagues have already been in discussion and are fully on board with a lot of the things that you've been hearing. And I think it will go somewhere, not only because I have Jadia on the other side of the table, but because we have a meeting tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yes, you're going into a meeting.
We have a meeting tomorrow, a national meeting tomorrow, where all the medical directors will be, and I'll be representing labs, and we will be talking, and we will do it. And for our labs, I want to tell the lab community in St. Lucia that the labs have done their risk assessments. I've seen the first draft of the plan, the lab plan. We are finalizing it. By tomorrow morning, the first draft will be circulated. But the labs have started their work, and I will be presenting that tomorrow as well as having the general discussion. So I think that we will be moving on. I think you said somebody will bell the cat. I think the cat will be belled. But I think as citizens, one of the things I want to tell all my St. Lucian brethren and sistren, always keep your eye on the ball and always hold everybody accountable. So when things don't go the right way, make the call. Where is that? Where is that? Just like me saying, where is UHC? Where is it?
Yes.
Make the call. So if you don't see things happening as they should, make the call. What's happening?
The public discussion has been heightened, and it is very good, because when you have questions being asked, then you have responses.
Correct.
And when you have even misinformation, misunderstandings, it presents an opportunity to reinforce, to clarify. And like the caller said just a little while ago, it is something you should never get tired of doing. Train and retrain and retrain. Let us talk and continue the discussion. If there is an information gap, ensure that we have the relevant individuals responsible to give us that information, because you may very well have a situation, which I have noticed over the past 2 weeks, where there are individuals who do not have the proper information. They are ignorant as to what exactly is happening, but they are the spokespersons. And so it introduces a web of confusion.
That's right.
People do not know where to call, who to go to, who's responsible for this and that. And so I'm hoping that after that meeting tomorrow, that we are able to identify a team, individuals who, like you said a little while ago, that you are responsible and will be representing the labs. Very important information, so that we know if there is a gap, if we have a concern as it relates to testing and so on, we know that you need to go to Dr. King to find out what is in place, whether there will be one central lab used for the testing, what is the period of time, you know, during which that sample will be there, how do you package the sample, we know this is the individual to go to. And I think this is what has been lacking in our discussion and communication, that everybody's looking to the CMO, everybody's looking to the minister, because we have not yet been able to identify who is responsible for what aspect of the national response.
Correct.
Yes, we'll take one more call. You can call in at 452. Excuse me, I'm sorry. We'll take just about one more call so that we can come to the end of the program. Dr. King, you will imagine that it is already almost 11:30. This is the longest that we've been on the program.
Wow.
Yes, we have our final call. Good night. Thank you for calling.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Just like to say again, to reiterate the training of the persons who are in charge.
Yes, Colin.
I also would like to say that it is important that we have a public awareness campaign, that people in the communities get pamphlets, that people at the workplaces get the pamphlets about Ebola and what can be used, what should be done. As you say, ignorance is the worst thing you could have right now. People need to be informed about Ebola, because Ebola is something that is serious and people are seeing it every day on the news, and it is something that is scary to the average person. And if you don't inform them, they will make up the assumptions and they will spread their assumptions. So it is important that the government gets on the ball and gives the proper information to the businesses, to the communities, to the police stations, to the
taxi drivers.
Everywhere, the taxi drivers everywhere. The same way you were doing with Chikungunya, Ebola is the next target.
Agreed. Agreed.
Thank
you so much for that contribution. Dr. King, we regrettably, we have come to the end of the program. Like I said, I really would have wished the show to continue, because there are so many other things that we can explore and so many areas that we can discuss. I thank you for being on tonight. Very informative and interesting discussion. You were able to bring in your expertise, your experience, and also your passion. When you have these three things coming together, then obviously it is going to be a beautiful show. You go into this meeting tomorrow, your expectations?
My expectations is that we'll have frank dialogue and that the science will prevail, and we're going to come out with a very clear plan, that we are technical people talking, so we can come up with a very good technical plan. So we will not allow fear and politics, for want of a better word, to interfere with our clear thinking. And I know that's how it's going to be, because I believe that, speaking to CMO this morning, I know that is that's the point at which we've reached. So that's what I expect to come out. So I think the general public can expect that soon thereafter they can hear a more substantive, a more technically grounded, scientifically sound plan that will meet the needs and will allay the fears. So people will know, oh, they have things in place, they are as prepared as they can possibly be. And that's all we can be, as prepared as we can possibly be. And then if we have to deal with a case, we'll do our very best.
Indeed. I know too that in terms of your own experience and your area of medicine, you're a pathologist, we have seen that a call has been issued for individuals who are highly skilled and highly trained to volunteer. There are Doctors Without Borders and so many other agencies that are volunteering in West Africa. Did a thought ever cross your mind?
It did. It did. It did cross my mind. It did. But I think my first priority is to my homeland. And then thereafter, when my home is safe, then I can lift my head up and look elsewhere.
Indeed. And speaking about service, I promised myself not to end this program if I do not ask you this question. Yeah. You've been a very present face, a very present voice, and not just voice. There has been action too in terms of your contribution to society. We saw our group of young people going across to study at the Johnson Wales University, I believe it was.
Illinois Institute of Technology. Johnson Wales we were involved too, but IIT.
Okay. IIT. And also we have had RISE, and we've had
yes.
so many projects in St. Lucia. Some persons believe that this path will inevitably lead you to one place, and that is public office. Do you have any desire to run
you're talking about elections?
Party elections. Elected office. I know you serve in the Senate now, which is a public office, and you make your contribution there.
Right.
Do you ever see yourself wearing a red or yellow shirt or green shirt, because green is in it these days, going on that platform and saying to the people, I have a contribution to make in cabinet, and I believe this is where I can be most effective?
No, I don't see myself taking the move towards party elections, party politics. And
although you've been called a Labour.
I've also been called a flambeau.
Lately, so, yes.
So no, but first and foremost, my passport says I'm a St. Lucian.
Yes.
Right. So I will, you know what I would like? I would like all of us St. Lucians to think hard and hold our public officers accountable. I would like all of us to raise our voices on issue and put party politics aside when we're talking about issues.
Yes.
Right? And for me, no, I will not run electoral politics. I've said so before. The reason I won't run it is because fundamentally, I don't believe in the division, that the tribalism of the red and the
somebody
yellow.
Somebody has to do it. You realize our system is set up in such a way that somebody has to do it.
I understand.
We might as well have the good people who have a solid contribution to make, who has a track record and a history in something other than something that would cause St. Lucians to be embarrassed at the end of the day, going into politics, as opposed to people who are skilled, who are trained, who love their country and have that desire, turning their backs and then living public office up to the ordinary, when I say it's not even ordinary, people with personal desires and who see public office as a means of enriching themselves and their families as opposed to service.
Well, I tell you what.
So you realize we have a problem.
I understand what you're saying, but I think that people get the kind of representation that they deserve. Our job is to raise our consciousness, all of us across this land, in every community. Raise our consciousness. When we raise that level of consciousness, that level of thinking, to the points of issues of development that are important to us in our homes, in our communities, in our country, rest assured that the representatives who are not true to that process will not stand. They will fall. And the people will get the representation that they deserve. You don't have to enforce it on people. What we have to do now is for all St. Lucians it's a call to conscience, it's a call to consciousness to everybody out there. Mind your corner, get up, and do what you know is right. Speak out for what you know is right. Vote for what you know is right. The people that have the character as well as the knowledge and intelligence that you believe can give you the kind of representation that you know you deserve. That is what you need to do. And if the party cannot deliver that kind of candidate to you, then that party is out. So then what we do is we put that, by doing that, we the people put the pressure on the party to find the candidates that they must find who can truly stand up and represent us.
Good character and
with good character, good integrity, and the knowledge. And we do that by us knowing what is a developmental plan, what we want in our communities. Every community must work on its community development plans so that when somebody comes bow wow by your door, you can tell them, hello, you want to come and talk to me? Let's talk about this now.
Yes.
I am knowledgeable about what we need here. Are you? Can you represent me?
Are you committed to this?
Are you committed to this?
Yes.
And I think, and along that same lines, I think it is time for our constitutional reform so that we can see how we can have a better type of governance and a better type of representation, genuine representation of our people, so that it is not part-time representation, but full-time representation of the constituency, because I don't believe that our constituencies are getting the kind of representation that they truly deserve, not only by the caliber of the people, but I think by the amount of time that people have to have time to spend on the constituency matters, because they are distracted into other things, ministries and elsewhere. And I think it's time to change some of that. And that's my view. Because Einstein said it well. Einstein said, I was telling my son that this morning, Einstein said, I am not a genius. It's what it is that I stay with the problem longer than most. I spend more time on the problem, in other words.
So you find a solution.
So you find a solution. You find a better solution.
Yes.
It's not the first one that pops into your head. You think it. Hard thinking, compassionate people is what we need to lead us. So they need to think hard. You need to spend more time with your people, more time thinking about your people's problems, and then you can represent.
Truly an example of a man with a hard mind and a soft heart. I thank you so much for joining us on In Touch tonight. Definitely, Dr. King. An invitation would be sent to you to be back. There is so much that we need to discuss. You spoke of constitutional reform, your time in the Senate. There are so many issues that we could have touched, but I really appreciated your presence and your contribution tonight. I truly believe that our listeners understand a little more as it relates to Ebola, where we are, what are some of the things that we need to do. And of course, I'm very relieved that we have a response coming in and that there will be a meeting tomorrow. We will be looking for a follow-up so that we can let you know what is happening on the national level to prepare. I thank you so much for joining. Thank you for staying with us. I know it has been an extended program. I thank especially to the management of Choice TV for allowing us this opportunity to share with you. We'll be back here next week, Monday, so please stay in touch. So much. I learned so much.